Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Think Liberty podcast. I'm Vinny Marshall. I'm joined today by a very special guest. But before I get to the special guest, I have another special guest. We're joined by our good friend whose name we still can't exactly figure out what the best way to pronounce it is. So we're just going to, Rosey would work. David would also work. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's up?
Thanks for joining us tonight, man. I appreciate it. Also joining us, everyone's favorite, Lonie Dupree. Hello, Lonie.
Am I really the favorite?
I don't know. You're my favorite, buddy.
Oh, okay.
Also joining us, our special guest this evening, the one, the only, Kyle Wagner. Hey, Kyle. What's going on, bud?
Hey, guys. What's up?
Howdy, howdy. Not too much for me. Just getting here to the end of my weekend. How about you, man? You do anything interesting this weekend?
Yeah, I went to a Memorial Day party today, cookout.
All right, rad. Did you have any intention of trying to get to the Young Convention? I know it's been going on. We've been advertising it a bit on the show. I know you try to make it to a lot of these libertarian events if you can.
Yeah, I usually just go to local ones. Like I live near DC. I'm in Baltimore, so if there's one in Baltimore, I'll go to that. But I generally don't travel for them.
Fair enough. Are you gonna go to the national convention?
He better show up.
Yeah, I am. I was able to become a delegate for Maryland.
Okay, there you go. I'll see you there. Get to finally meet, man.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah, hell yeah. So, I have some questions for you. So, we've got a group of friends here that we have on Facebook, and I asked them some questions leading up to this podcast. So I will have some questions for you from them here in a bit. But before that, there was a video that just came out, and for the listeners, I just had everybody watch this video. You can go watch it yourself. Just Google cop punches woman on New Jersey beach. But it's a video of just that. It opens up with the cop just punching this chick in the head a few times, and everyone's screaming, "Stop resisting, stop resisting!" As she gets she doesn't get punched long. He swings at her a few times right in the head, and then a bunch of I think it's like 3 cops total just kind of get in and swarm her, and they're just kind of trying to fight her. She's pretty squirrely. What was your guys' initial reaction watching that video? Kyle, we'll start with you.
I just I thought it seemed like the cop overreacted, but I mean the video kind of comes in the beginning or like in the middle, so you don't really see all the stuff that led up to it. I don't know what prompted that. She probably just gave him some lip, and he was having a bad day, and he just lost it on her.
Yeah, he sure did. He really went for it. David, how about you, man?
Yeah, like he said, the video kind of started out like most of these videos, kind of in the middle. But honestly, I was kind of thinking, are they beach cops? Like they might have had nothing better to do than punch women. That might.
Is
be
that a
what
real
they do.
thing? Is that a thing? Like specifically for the beach? Like cops just
Beach patrol.
I don't know, man. You're the Californian here.
I don't know. I don't like the beach. I don't go to the beach.
But
I'm like Northern California though, so I have like London beaches. Like there's not out here in Northern California. It's not like in Southern California where you see like that's where you get the pictures of everyone out like surfing and everything's great and it's a nice sunny beach. Out here's like San Francisco beaches. It's always overcast. It's kind of crappy.
nice.
There's heroin needles and 40s all over the place. There's a Taco Bell on one of them though.
I mean,
kind of cool.
See, I can't imagine a situation where really anybody would have to wail on a girl's head like that. I just can't imagine that she was that much of a threat to them.
Yeah, that's the part that's hard is you watch it and you wonder what exactly happened. I mean, this is the same kind of thing that obviously this is a completely different situation because the person in the situation I'm about to talk about died. But the shaver video, it's kind of the same thing though. It's like the first reaction that I had when I watched that video is like, you got the guy sitting there with like his hands above his head. I know they can make arguments about protocol and stuff like that, but how much of a threat is somebody who is like, you got him, like they're detained. Why do you have to keep going? And I have an article here that actually explains a little bit about what happened. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory as much as I have at least. So it's a woman with, it's odd. This article describes him specifically as the father of her child. So I don't know. I'm just going to go ahead and refer to him as that. She's 20, and she was there with him and her child. And it seems she may have had alcohol like on her, but from what I'm reading, she was negative when she did the breathalyzer. So she's been charged with aggravated assault, apparently from spitting bodily fluids at a police officer, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, obstruction, and being a minor in possession of alcohol. Okay, so where is it here? I was reading something that was talking about how she had spit on them, and then there's some story that said that she had apparently kicked one of them, but that's being disputed, and the cops are looking for, asking people if they have more videos. So it seems like a little kind of wishy-washy right now. You've got these accounts of her being a little more aggressive at first, then you asked her, and her story is basically the cop approached her, asked her, for her information. She didn't want to give it to the cop, and then she tripped, and then the cops jumped on her, is her story. So we don't exactly know kind of what happened here, but I mean, like in the past, Kyle, I know you've taken some flack for the positions that you've had, but would you say that watching this, like, I mean, you even kind of alluded to it already, like the punching, when there's three of the cops punching in the head, probably not necessary. Like, even if you got spit at.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. But again, we couldn't see anything prior to that. It kind of jumped in the middle.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it came in at a weird spot. Isn't this, remember, what was the last one, Kyle, that happened when you were, do you remember the last one in your group where people were arguing about the beach? It was some issue at a beach.
Yeah, it was the holes in the beach. You know that they had somebody had dug these deep holes in the beach in Florida Beach, and like the guy I think got arrested for it or something like that. But they have a law that you're not allowed to dig these deep holes in the beach because people leave the holes and people fall in the holes and it causes all these problems. When it was like the guy was building a sandcastle and he just dug these like really deep holes. And so the town had eventually passed a law, and my case was, well, that's public property is owned and controlled by the government, and property rights work the same for public property as they do for private property, so they can make those kind of rules and enforce those kind of rules, but everybody's like, oh, now they can castles.
Yeah, it is one of those silly things that like the headline in and of itself sounds a bit silly, right? Like, man arrested for digging.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not that silly because they're a hazard, and you don't want people digging like, some people dig like to bury somebody or to build a sandcastle. They might dig a hole that's 4 or 5 feet deep, and then somebody walking along trips in those things, or the beachcombers fall in them. I mean, all kinds of stuff can happen. So it's actually a hazard. That's why they passed the rule.
Yeah, I remember you taking a lot of heat for that, man.
Yeah, because libertarians only like to see things one way, and it's always the anti-government way. So they're like, "Oh yeah, Big Brother's cracking down on your sandcastles now," and it's like, "Well, no, not sandcastles. You can't dig a deep hole that's going to be a safety hazard that somebody might potentially break their leg in." And that's why they have that. And I thought it was something to do with the guy's tools being metal, but I could be wrong about that. But there was 2 components to it. I remember something about metal tools as well, which would be again a hazard if you have metal tools that get buried in the sand. They end up rusting. If somebody steps on them, I mean, it could cause problems. So probably have against metal tools as well.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. So with that said, though, I guess it's kind of different because she got attacked, and you've already said, like, you didn't sing. So the fact that, like, on the beach, probably, I'm assuming there's a law that minors can't have alcohol on this beach. That doesn't really change your opinion here, does it, Kyle?
No, I mean, my opinion is kind of, not hard on it because I haven't seen the entire incident. I only saw the middle of the incident. So she could have had no idea because we only see the middle of the incident. It seemed like his punches were like a hammer fist, if you follow MMA. It was the kind of side of his palm, kind of like beating on her head just twice to try to subdue her. I did think it was excessive.
Well, let's assume the worst. Let's assume the worst of this little story I have. that I kind of stumbled my way through. I apologize for that. I thought that was the part where it talked about what had happened, but I'm not going to go through here and try and find it and waste everyone's time. But let's assume that she spit in his face and kicked him in the balls, and that's what happened before the video. What would your opinion be then?
I mean, nurses get spit in the face too. Can we punch them?
Dude, do what now?
I mean, like, nurses get spit in the face too. Can we punch them or something? I mean, why are cops immune to? I don't know if I phrased that what I just said correctly. I'm trying to say, like, I'm trying to say nurses get spit on too, and like, you don't see them punching the patients. I think that's what I was trying to articulate there.
Well, right. I think it's just kind of this general idea that, like, if you're a professional in those kind of instances, I think what's expected. I think what's expected is you kind of just act professional regardless, even if it's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I don't feel like getting even more aggressive is necessary. I mean, like, it just seems the police profession is just like lost its mind.
You know, they lose their cool sometimes when, you know, you give them lip or you challenge their authority. And I mean, and I did see her trying to like get her arm out as they're trying to arrest her, and she's like, you know, you can't arrest me. What are you arresting me for, and all this stuff. And they're just like, yeah, they don't even care at that point. They're just on autopilot. They're trying to make the arrest, and it's like all they see is this girl just will not submit. So, you know, that's what they do. They employ force to put the person down or to suppress the person. I mean, that's what they are. They're police. You know, they're an institutional force. So people, I don't know why people act like they're gonna be all nice and polite and, you know, treat you with kid gloves. I mean, if you give them shit, they're gonna beat the crap out of you. That's how they work. I don't know what people expect. You think you're gonna like smack a cop and, you know, he's not gonna come back? Like,
It's getting bad. It's getting bad. So, well, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I got all these questions here for you, Kyle. A whole bunch of questions. I'm sure we're not even going to get through all of them. Well, until then, we'll have patience. So the first question I have here: what's your opinion of Bill Weld?
The number one OG and cap.
You know, I wasn't a Bill Weld fan. I mean, you know, I thought what he said about Hillary, like, basically you know, coming just shy of endorsing Hillary, like the night before the election or 2 nights before. I thought that was ridiculous. I didn't watch all those town halls and stuff, but I get the feeling that he's very moderate or just not very good. You know, he's not a hardcore libertarian. You know, I mean, that said, with some of the crazies that we've had in the party, like, I feel like a guy that's sort of mushy would be better than a guy that's just going to be a complete embarrassment. You know, so like Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson was a mushy moderate. You know, he wasn't somebody to like, you just rallies hearts and minds. You know, but he was kind of goofy, but we could do worse, honestly. Like, and we can do worse again in 2020. So I hope someone else steps up to challenge for it. That's a lot better than Bill Weld, but I don't see anybody on the horizon. Maybe Larry. I love what Larry Sharp's doing. Otherwise, I mean, we have a very thin bench. People think like, oh, the Libertarians. Why'd you pick that guy? Well, we picked Gary Johnson because he had huge fur and he had run for political office for president for, and like our blue chip candidate compared to the other guys. So Austin was 35 years old and thought like, boy, he wasn't going to get it. You know, McAfee's crazier than hell. So who do you guys think? I mean, who do we have? You know, if you're going to say, oh, Bill Weld sucks, like, give me some other options that are going to be better. And I don't think Adam Kokesh, he'll probably be in jail during the election because he's like in and out of jail all the time with his drug issues. So I don't see him being a practice. You know, so if it's Weld, I'd have some.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good argument, or at least bring up a good point about the quality and quantity available candidates. How about you, David? What's your opinion on Bill Weld?
I don't know much about him, to be honest. I did like Gary Johnson, so I mean, he, Weld was kind of a package deal with him. I mean, Weld seems like a cool guy. I mean, I didn't come around till like maybe 2 years ago. So
next question for Kyle. Opinion on classical liberalism before and after Mises.
Yeah, I feel like the older classical liberalism is like based around natural rights. It's a natural rights foundation, and that's sort of the starting place for it. And I think the founding fathers were classical liberals. I think Bastiat was a great classical liberal, but also I don't think Bastiat was an Austrian or a Misesian. Mises really changed everything because his philosophy is utilitarian consequentialism, and that's how he grounds the philosophy. He's like, this is what's going to work best for society. He never appeals to natural rights to make his case. He's just like, everything is about consequences and everything is about what works best. So that's just a completely different philosophical grounding, and it's a completely different way of making your arguments. Instead of saying this is immoral because it violates natural rights, you're saying this is immoral because it's bad for society, or it's bad for our process of society, and it diminishes our output and diminishes our material well-being. So he's always talking about consequences, which is much different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably a more confident place to argue from.
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, I feel really good with it. I've been very confident arguing with everybody across the political spectrum, because everybody has holes. Everybody you're just like, hey, I know you think this is going to work, but you forgot about these side effects. There's always consequences, and you point them out, and they're like, well, shit, so it corners people.
Yeah, it's tough, especially, and I've come to I'm no longer the biggest fan of natural rights. I know I was for some time. It's not a place, aside from my beliefs of it all. It's not a very confident place to argue from, because you just get down certain rabbit holes, and I mean, even in our debate that we had, Kyle, I didn't take the natural rights position there. I mean, if you remember, I think I framed a premise of like people on an island deciding on a norm, right? And
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so even then, like, I wasn't I wasn't confident going from the standpoint of natural rights, and I think that's a good point to bring up. Those if you go with the consequentialist argument, it's going to be, I don't know. I feel like it's a much more confident place to argue from.
Yeah, it's more persuasive for most people. And if you think about, like, imagine like a primitive tribe or an Indian tribe or something that has chosen to live communally. Maybe they don't have private property. Maybe they don't have a market. They're just maybe it's a small, like I said, a small tribe. We can't sit here and say, well, they're organized in an unnatural manner. I mean, however they've chosen to do it is how they've chosen to do it. It's not necessarily unnatural. The fact that they don't have private property capitalism.
Right. Well, I mean, you bring a good point, and it's something that people forget a lot of times. I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make, especially on the ANCAP side, is they kind of take this point. It's something I try to be careful of a lot. They take this point of argument as if it's everyone's fighting for what happens inside these borders, right? Like, it just assumes that everyone is kind of fighting for control of everything, where it's the ANCAP position probably shouldn't be that, right? You probably shouldn't be arguing from a position of oh, this is how it would go everywhere, right? Because it's kind of exactly as you say, like, what if a group of people don't want to do that? That's a natural occurrence. There's people will organize, and they'll collectively decide on the norms, that they want, and to prescribe a certain solution for an entire area is probably inaccurate.
I mean, that's what we do with capitalism, is we say these are the rules of this area. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. But but the thing is, is I guess the place that you're arguing from, that doesn't that there's not really a fallacy on your part, right? You're not claiming that it's a borderless, stateless society that you're trying to argue from a standpoint of.
No, I'm not. I mean, whenever we're going to have never really understood the notion of the borderless world. That just doesn't seem realistic to me at all. And just, I mean, I understand borders are man-made lines, that they're, technically imaginary, we say imaginary, but it's just like the border on a sports field, where they draw spray paint on the field. I mean, once we lay the border down, it has meaning, at least to the people, not to animals, but to people. So I just don't see us ever having a borderless world.
So from what I gather, a lot of times, so if I'm being fair in defense of Kyle here, for a lot of times what I see you argue from, I'll see a lot of people kind of engage in these like the hypothetical stuff a lot. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, but it seems you tend to prefer just to argue with where we are today, like right now.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, sometimes they'll start with the hypotheticals, like, oh, well, in the hypothetical stateless ANCAP society, and I'm like, okay, well, you're starting with a hypothetical, which, in my position, doesn't exist and can't exist, because, it has. We go, and then I go into all the reasons why I don't think it can exist. So I don't like how ANCAPs will commonly start with, okay, well, we're already there in Ancapistan, and then this is. You know what I mean? Like they skip over the how is this actually going to work part, which is sort of the critical part.
It's kind of a waste of time because I mean it doesn't help anything right now, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, it doesn't, and I also want people to live in the now and live in and deal with our current reality and understand that, in my perspective, this is a political struggle, and the way forward is to actually just win elections. I mean, I understand that's really, really hard, but you have to compete, and a lot of times we don't even compete. We don't even run candidates in all these races. We just let the Democrats and Republicans have them. And if you want to say, oh, the Libertarian Party is a waste of time, and don't bother with that, even if it's if you're going through the Republican or Democratic parties, we still don't run candidates. You're letting neocons and social democrats just run against each other in every race, and we're not even putting up a candidate a lot of times.
Yeah.
And you're never going to win that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, and for the listeners, if you're curious as to why we we stick on this topic, so Kyle created and runs a group called, I think what is it called? Anarcho-capitalism versus minarchism debate group.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep, and you can go ahead and find it on Facebook. It's a fun place. It can be an annoying place. It's certainly a place. I'll let you go ahead and find out what it is for yourself there, listeners, but that's why we'll stick on that a little bit. If you hear us kind of venturing into those weeds with Kyle, he's built a whole group off of the arguments between ANCAP and minarchist, and without totally giving up on everything, I believe. And I will say that, to your defense, Kyle, some of the ways that a lot of anarcho-capitalists do argue are a little silly. I will admit that a lot of times some of these arguments you sit back and watch them and it's like, oh boy.
Well, I know exactly what he's talking about. Arguing theoreticals is just silly and it does nothing.
Well, and it's also to a point of like, if you're gonna really talk about that kind of stuff and you want to get really honest about it, you should talk about implementation. The implementation debate it can be an engaging debate and it can be an interesting debate, but that's a big debate to have on a Facebook thread, right? Like you gotta walk through some stuff. That's usually not the kind of patience that people want to give each other online.
It's amazing that, of all the philosophies that we could have adopted, anarchy is like the one philosophy that makes people eschew politics. They're like, oh, we don't want government at all. We don't want elections at all. So we're not going to participate in this process at all. And so we close the door to the one avenue that we need to be going down in order to advance our cause.
Right. And so that would be the argument against, because there are some anarchists that agree that working in the party can be used to get to their goals, but what do you think of them? What do you think of those kind of folk?
I mean, it makes sense. Like they're better. I understand. Like at least they're voting and contributing money and time to advance libertarian candidates. But I think they would really struggle in debates because you have to come from a place of talking about policy. And if the one guy's going, well, we need higher taxes, and you're going, well, we need no taxes. If you say we need no taxes, there should be no taxation and theft, you almost shut the door to yourself being even listened to at the table, like to being a credible policy, you know, um, giving credible policy recommendations. It's like this guy's way too radical. He doesn't know what he's talking about, so we just completely ignore him. Whereas if I take a low tax position, all of a sudden let's hear more about how you want to lower taxes, what you think tax are to. You're taken much more seriously than someone who takes a taxation is theft and that's the end of it kind of position. A political anarchist like an Adam Kokesh or something like that would really struggle in a debate with somebody who's just not an anarchist and is not even like he's just completely off the reservation to that person, you know.
Right. It's a radical message that sometimes people have a hard time digesting. That's for sure. So let's stay on policy. Speaking of policy, we have another question here is what policy should libertarians seeking office at the local and state level seek to influence?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the drug issue is super important. I get a little like burned out on it with us because for me, I came from the economic side of things, and I feel strongly about ending the drug war. But at our state convention, it was like every candidate was just like, we're gonna get marijuana legalized, and which is great. But I mean, I feel like it's the stoned libertarian is a stereotype that's just um, is so common, and I'd love to see us get more into the serious stuff. I love foreign policy, but you were saying local level, so obviously schools are a big deal. I think voucher schools are obviously very controversial because they're not full privatization of schools. Um, but even something simple like giving people tax credits for private tuition paid, so it's like you're paying private tuition, so we're going to give you a tax credit, not money in your pocket, but we're going to give you a break on taxes for the money that you spent on tuition because you're taking your kids out of the public system and you're paying to have them privately educated. So why should you have to contribute to the public system? And I would also like to see, I mean, even if you could, this will never happen, but if you could have sort of tuition for public schools, all of a sudden it makes private schools more enticing because now the parents have to choose where they're destined to versus pay private versus pay private, and it's more of a level playing field. I think that's maybe an achievable thing. Um, just in general, lower sales taxes, lower property taxes, less frivolous spending, that kind of stuff. Other than that, I'm not really sure. Drugs, schools, crime is always a big issue, especially for me around Baltimore. Crime is a big issue, um, and yeah, crime reform, that's a good thing. Stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, other than that, that's all I could think of off the top of my head.
No, that's fair, and that would certainly give someone running at a local level a lot to do if they just followed the things that you listed.
Yeah.
What about you, David?
I think I think Kyle's right. We do need to stop with the taxation and theft stuff. It's not a good message. It makes people not listen to us. Um, and I do like Kyle's school idea. I live, Kyle, I live in Memphis, so we're kind of right behind you on crime. You see how the drug war affects people. You see how poverty affects people every single day, and it's saddening that just a government could run a city into the ground like that. Like it exists essentially in theory to to uphold the law and take care of people, but it just doesn't do that. That's kind of the end of my rant right there.
We're gonna roll on through here. Got some more questions. Kyle, this one specifically for you, bud. When is this is interesting. I'm interested to hear your response here. When is disobedience, civil or otherwise, justified?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've talked before about the different levels or degrees of resistance to government tyranny. It's obviously you can be an active supporter of government to the point where you're actually reporting people and really just a rah-rah government person. But on the negative side, where you're opposed to their policies, you could take a passive resistance kind of thing, or ignoring the law, to outright breaking the law, and then breaking the law in a way that will be noticed in order to draw attention to your cause, and then all the way up into violent resistance and actually shooting at law enforcement. And so people have liked to get me on like the slave issue. They're like, well, what would you have done in slavery? You know, and because it's a tough one. And the law was that people were property, and if there's a runaway slave, are you going to call the authorities and turn them in? Are you going to help them? Are you going to actively break the law, or are you going to shoot at the people at the police who come to return the slave to their owner? So it's a tough question. I think it's a question for. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it's a question. It really is on a case by case basis, and it's on an individual level, and you have to decide how much that issue means to you and how much you're willing to sacrifice for it. I mean, are you willing to go to jail for the rest of your life for it? Like Edward Snowden ended up, getting a life sentence for Silk Road. So, I mean, that can happen. Are you willing to die for it? For most people, that answer is actually no. Certainly over something like speed limits, they're probably not willing to get into the fact that they broke the speed limit and refused to stop. So you really have to decide how much it means to you. And I think if you believe in something and it means a lot, and you're willing to be a martyr for that.
You're cutting out a little bit there on us, Kyle. But I think what you were saying there at the tail end sounded a lot like I don't know if it was Lonie or David that was talking about it when you were saying, like, I think it was Lonie. Most people just want to, get off of work and go home and relax. And I think that's probably the big hang up for a lot of folks, is I think a lot of folks aren't too excited to take up arms and start a new revolution. I think most people just want to get home from work and rest.
That's true. I don't. Not everybody is invested in politics like we are. So it's just most people aren't. To be honest, you got to kind of cater to them because they're the ones that vote.
No, and look, going to the conversation that we were having before, what I've noticed a lot when I talk to people that aren't involved in the liberty movement and aren't as invested into politics as people in the liberty movement usually tend to be, they're not looking at it from a situation at all that even considers scaling the government back a little bit. Even the conservatives at this point, or not even the conservatives, as to say all of them, but there are some of them, right? They just argue from a standpoint of like, we got what we got, now we got to figure out how to pay for it all. And that's a hard place to argue.
You rarely hear about like dismantling agencies and stuff. To be honest, like I think Trump is like the only person I've heard talk about dismantling any kind of agency recently.
Well, he gets treated like Satan for it. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty that you can get on Trump for.
Oh yeah. But there's occasionally some stuff that he does that I'll say, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, but just whenever he talks
occasionally
about dismantling an agency, people get all up in arms like, oh, he's such a monster. It's like, no, this is good.
Like, no,
Okay,
let me show you why this needs to be dismantled.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
We need to pull apart more. Our buddy Justin Flowers, Kyle, you're familiar with him. He has a funny question here. He says, when are you going to change your goddamn profile picture?
Yeah, this picture's from it's very old. I mean, it might be 2010 or something like that. I mean, it's pretty old. I think, like, I never expected all the attention and all the memes and all the stuff that's happened with people using my face on all this stuff. And, it's just become kind of, a running joke, but people seem to really enjoy those memes, and they just sort of enjoy the character. I think having the helmet on and the goggles, it sort of turned me into this like internet character. And I just think if I were to change the picture, we would lose that. And on the one hand, I should change it, and that poor girl that's in the picture with me, who's now married to some other guy, and we weren't even dating, we were just friends, but I feel bad for her being stuck in this picture that's well known, but it's crazy, that those Kyle memes go like everywhere. All kinds of people are like, I've seen him in memes. I don't know who he is, but like I've seen this picture in memes. So
if I buy that helmet, will you sign it?
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I should change it. I guess it's due, but
Do you
No, don't.
do you still have the
yeah,
helmet?
I still have it. I still wear it skiing. Yeah, it's
Oh,
Don't
okay.
change your profile picture. It's too good. It's
good
got its
quality
own
helmet,
cult of
then. I guess
personality now.
Yeah, that's the thing with it.
If I ever take up skiing, I'm gonna have to get one like that because it's held up. It's a good quality
Yeah.
helmet.
It is. It is okay. Let's go on to a real question here. Okay.
These aren't real questions.
Well, I mean, it's a funny question, but it's relevant though. I mean, Kyle's right. Like the memes are everywhere. The helmet is always the best punchline. It's great.
No,
It's
nobody cared who he was until he put the helmet on.
that's right. Okay, so I got a 2-part question here, Kyle. You should like this one. It's about monetary policy.
All right.
One, until libertarians see the Fed abolished, what should our monetary policy be? And part 2 is, what monetary policy would you like to see in the event that the Fed is abolished?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Yeah, I think it's really hard because it's such a mess. I mean, they could not have constructed a crazier monetary system. I mean, I think everyone understands, like, our money is based on debt. So, like, borrowing even from private banks, it creates credit. It's credit money. But from an accounting standpoint, they simultaneously create, for the bank's purposes, a receivable and a liability. It's nuts, the way that it works. And so we've got this sort of like spider web of debt that creates the monetary system of our entire economy. So I don't know how you get out of that. I mean, they shouldn't be. I think they've kept interest rates too low. But I mean, what do I know? Like, how do we know what market rates are even supposed to be? Because everything's controlled by the central bank, and so they could be creating all these speculative bubbles, which it looks like they are. But who knows? And I just, man, I don't know. I mean, if I was like the chairman of the Fed, like, how do you restore something like that to the market? I really don't have a good answer. And I think books have been written. Ron Paul wrote a book about how, the case for gold. And I think in that they talk about the transition to a gold standard, or away from the system that we have. But can you guys hear me okay? All right.
Yes, sir.
I just think that it's going to blow up. I think it's going to be a huge disaster at some point. I mean, we have all of this debt out there, 21 trillion in debt, and then, they say as much as 60 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And I don't know when the chickens come home to roost on all that. That's been our position, is that eventually that's going to come due, or that's going to blow up in our faces, but it just seems to continue and continue and continue indefinitely. So I don't know when it catches up with us, but it does seem like something that I guess what I'm trying to say is, I don't ever see any kind of like thoughtful corrective action. I see more of like some sort of inflationary situation, I guess, ultimately. Although I think a lot of libertarians don't understand that debt deflation is also a threat. So who the hell knows? I don't know. But, I'm a gold bug. I trust gold. And I think that, gold will win out. But I might be dead by that time. But I just think it's shown through thousands and thousands of years to be, sticks around.
Yeah, well, anything is better than a monetary policy based on debt. Really, I mean, I don't disagree with you at all on the monetary position of the stuff that you lined out. It really is based off credit and debt. And it very much is like this big spider web mess. So I agree there. Yeah, it's gnarly. It's gnarly, and what the Fed does is also gnarly. Their setting
It's a
of the
spider
rates
web of debt.
being
Yeah.
low, a great point. We don't know what it would be. We are so far removed from knowing what it would be at this point that one almost worries to know what things would look like without, and not because I'm worried about the natural state of what the market would look like, but only that it's like you said, there's a lot that has to come crashing down for a change. That deflation is a real issue, and there's a lot of factors in play that could make for a lot of really troubling financial situations for a lot of people. Just kind of by the way this whole thing is kind of duct taped together. So
Yeah, it does seem like it's duct taped together, but I've learned, from experience now. I've gone through personal panics where I'm like, oh my God, the sky is falling, and then it doesn't fall. And I've learned, like, you just have to relax and face reality as it comes at you, and not be racked with fear. If you ever seen these like prepper shows, sometimes they talk about financial calamity, and they're hoarding like 10,000 canned goods and bottled water and machine guns and stuff, all waiting for the end times. And it's like, you just can't live that. You gotta live in just what you can, and not let the fear overcome you. Not let fear of a depression or anything like that overwhelm you. Because as of right now, we're not in a depression. We're sort of limping along, but like, you can't be overwhelmed by fear.
yeah, definitely, certainly does not seem to be like a fun way to live. So how about the second part of that question? So let's say that someone untangled that whole mess, right? The Fed is abolished. So I mean, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you would probably favor the gold standard, or return to the gold standard in that instance.
I don't know. I think Mises was an advocate for free banking as well. Although he has some quotes that are like, the gold standard. People think the gold standard is antiquated. They think that maybe there's not enough gold. That's not the case. I mean, when you have, it's like if you were to imagine a game, everybody playing a board game. If there's less currency units to go around, those currency units have more purchasing power per unit. So the purchasing power of the unit of currency is stronger when there's a smaller supply and weaker when there's a larger supply. It adjusts, the value of the currency adjusts to the quantity available. So that's actually one of the things. Like gold can work for us. Even with 300 million people, it can still work for us. I think crypto is interesting. I'm not anti-crypto. I could see something like that. Competing currencies on the crypto level working out, but yeah, it's supposed to be market currency, free market currency. People should be able to use and trade in whatever they want. It shouldn't be by law that you have to use dollars. So
yeah, I think
I don't know how the
I agree with you. I think crypto is I it's kind of like you said, like a free market for these things. I think gold should be able to be in the equation. I think crypto is going to be. And to your point, you see the same thing happening with purchasing power with crypto too. It used to just be people would talk about a Bitcoin, and then the value of Bitcoin went up so much to where now, it's a legitimate conversation to talk about like Satoshis, which is the lowest kind of value unit of a Bitcoin. It's when you kind of start to break it down, because a portion of a Bitcoin can be still worth $5,000.
Yeah, what fraction of a Bitcoin is a Satoshi? I don't even know.
A Satoshi. That's I'm not sure the exact fraction of it, but apparently it's the smallest fraction that they play with. But now I was reading something interesting though, that apparently a Satoshi, which is the smallest fraction of a Bitcoin that is measured, is now worth something like 5 units of the Venezuelan currency.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's getting bad out there.
Yeah, I don't know how people can look at a Venezuela and just continue down that same path. I mean, it's very obvious that these policies don't work in other countries. I'll say progressive policies. None of these places are really socialist in the dictionary definition of the term. They kind of still have a market. It's just that the government is taking over some industries, but still participating in the market. It's not a Soviet style. They don't own everything. They still have private enterprise and they still have a market economy, but it's just that, like I said, it's like a mixed or It's just kind of messy.
Yeah, Hayek called it competitive socialism.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. There's really no good label for this, what it is. Democratic socialism kind of works. Yeah.
Yeah, it's slippery. Yeah, and I agree. I don't know why. I mean, you've got, by all rights, Venezuela should be up to their ears in revenue, with all the oil they have, but nope. So
They have a shit
they
ton of
got a lot.
oil. Why are they not rich?
Well, oil prices collapsed, and that didn't help them. But their output also collapsed as the government nationalized the oil companies, and they went to the people with this case of, oh, this is Venezuela's national resources, and these private exploiters are taking advantage and profiting off of our natural resources that wealth should rightfully belong to the people, and so nationalized the oil industry, in the name of the people and all that. And that's sort of the angle they took on it. And as it turned out, the government couldn't run the oil industry obviously nearly as well as the supposedly greedy capitalists could.
Yeah, and that's a very large reason of why everything fell apart, is they completely neglected all of, in a couple different ways, right? Not only was the machinery and all the hardware that was used for the production of the oil to totally neglected on the level to where stuff started just failing, but it was also like there's these third parties that are involved too that are supposed to handle like the dealings of the oil and all that, and so a lot of their debts to those third parties have started to go unpaid, and just kind of irresponsibly handled because the social policies are so cumbersome financially, that when they were operating at a level that was, I guess, possible to be maintained when the oil prices were high and there was such a big surplus, and you had the private companies running stuff, but then they nationalized it and all the hardware comes down a few tiers, and then you get all these irresponsible managements of these third parties that are supposed to be facilitating the deals for the oil, and everything just starts kind of crumbling and falling apart on top of the fact that prices fell. And people like to use that kind of stuff, that kind of nuance, to make an argument that Venezuela and what happened there isn't to the fault of socialism, but all of those details that Kyle discussed, that I discussed, are all crumbling under the weight of an overburdensome social policy. Right? It's the fact that the policy was only possible when they were running at a surplus with oil prices so high. Right? I think the name of the game is to have a policy that doesn't require such outlandish kind of production and returns. So we got a couple more questions here, Kyle, and then I'll let you have the rest of your night back. So I think here's a question that most people would have to pose toward a minarchist if they were arguing from a standpoint of no government at all, which is, America was a minarchy effectively at its conception. If a new minarchy was formed, how do you prevent it from sliding down the same path?
I mean, it's just politics, like you have to stay in control and you have to keep winning elections and you have to keep people preferring monarchy. But if your population starts to shift to where they prefer a gigantic welfare warfare state, then that's what you're going to have. I mean, it's anarchists act like, oh, well, we have some safe solution where all this entire population of progressives isn't going to have big government. Of course, they're going to have a big government. They're progressive. You live in a progressive population, you're going to have government. So it's like it's a matter of living a population that understands the benefits of and prefers to keep it small, and having that majority. It is the will of the people that gets reflected in their government and in the society. So I guess my answer is, you need to, in order to get to minarchism, you need to win elections. In order to keep minarchism, you need to keep winning elections. The way you do that is by continuing to persuade the majority that small government is the best system, is the best way.
Sure, that's fair. Okay, so Lonnie, David, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Nah.
Okay.
On minarchy?
Well, no, not necessarily minarchy in general. The fact, so if a minarchy were reestablished, how do you prevent it from sliding down, to the overbearing government that we have today?
Well, I feel like it kind of slid. It progressively slid as and like as technology got better, people got lazier over time. They didn't want to bother holding their representatives accountable and whatnot. I think that's how we got where we are. I mean, every any political system's going to slip somewhere eventually. So it's just kind of how it goes. I think people just need to be if you're unhappy with something and you're really passionate about it, go out there and do something about it. Don't just complain.
I don't know if you really can. I mean, can you? Uh, I mean, because we already had it and it became what it is now. If it restarts over to that again, how do you know in 200 years it doesn't become one again? I I mean, I don't think you can really accurately predict these kind of things, and I don't know if there's really any kind of solutions that that you can put in to prevent them. I mean, you have a we have a constitution that's supposed to limit the government, and it's not. So, what can you do? I don't think there's really anything you can do other than just keep the population preferring the monarchy, like Kyle said.
Next question. Kyle, do you think that the Libertarian Party's meme culture is a positive or a negative for the liberty movement?
I don't know if it's exclusive to the Libertarian Party. I mean, memes are everywhere. They're just a part of our culture in general. Every party is using memes. We've seen Occupy Democrats and, being liberal, which drives me nuts that they call themselves liberals. But, every side, Republicans, Democrats, and Libertarians, all use memes in their messaging and in their communication. So I think it's a byproduct of social media and not of libertarianism or anything like that. So, I mean, I like anyone else, appreciate a good meme. Not all memes are created equal. Some memes are terrible, but you can get people thinking with a well crafted meme.
No, it's true. It's true. It's funny when you sit and like talk about it because it just feels like it's silly to talk about, like memes, but it's true. You really can get people thinking with the right one.
Proud to do my service.
Oh, and you do well. You do well, friend. David and Lonnie are both good meme machines, if I do say so myself. Lonnie, I know you don't have an argument, right? Like you don't have a problem with the meme culture.
No, I don't. I think it's good. I think. I mean, I don't know really how much like grand influence they have, like on a massive scale. Because maybe it's just the ones I look at. Maybe it's just the memes that I like. I don't think anyone's minds are going to be changed from some of these. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely craft them in such a way to get people thinking. I know Jack Lloyd was talking about that whenever we had him on, that kind of like that guerrilla marketing kind of stuff that he was talking about. Those are effective ways. Um, but I kind of think that that sometimes I'm not saying like him or like what they do, but I think that sometimes when people try too hard to make a meme, it just kind of just falls flat and it doesn't do what they want it to do to get people thinking about stuff, and people just kind of just go, yeah, left can't meme or whatever. Or something like that. They just accuse the person of being a leftist because they made a bad meme. It's just kind of funny. So yeah, you can't really. It just gotta just happen. Like you can't like really plan a. Yeah, you can't really plan a meme.
No, it just comes to you. It comes to the meme. The meme. It just passes through you, right? So I'll close on this, Kyle. This is something I like to try and ask as many people's opinion on as I can remember to. You get in these debates. You have this group, this anarcho-capitalist versus anarchist group. So obviously, a lot of the stuff you're talking about here is like winning elections and stuff like that, talking to people, winning them over. With that said, what's a way that you prefer to, I mean, when you're not in these, debate groups, you're actually talking to people like progressives or conservatives, or what's a way that you like to market liberty? What's a way that you like to talk about liberty? What's a way that you like to sell the cause?
All right, you're breaking up a little bit, so hopefully I get this answer out all together. First of all, I do activism with the LP. I like the fact that having our own party distinguishes us from Democrats and Republicans, and people sometimes ask for my opinion just because they know that I'm not in one of those two camps. So they like to hear that. When I'm trying to talk politics with somebody, I'm very subtle about it. I'll ask leading questions that make them think of answers that are the answer that I want them to think, sort of the Socratic method kind of thing. Like I said, my influence is just subtle, and I just have conversations. I'm not antagonistic at all with people. I'm not confrontational with them. I just I point things out and try to get them thinking in the right direction, or thinking in the direction of smaller government, private property, free enterprise, capitalism, that sort of angle. The Go ahead.
So then you kind of prefer then to like let them set the boundaries of the conversation with the stuff that they're talking about, and then kind of or offer libertarian talking points to the things that they're comfortable discussing.
Yeah, or one thing I'll do is like take socialized medicine or universal health care, which is a very popular progressive idea right now. So I'll just start pointing out some of the cost side, because all they've ever heard is good positive things, and they've never considered like, okay, well, if this is free to every consumer, you're going to start seeing some shortages, right? You're going to start seeing long wait times because there's no cost to people, so they just start to overwhelm the thing, and then you'll see doctors overcharge the government, so then the government needs to control the doctors and how much they can charge, and then you just start pointing out these problems and these issues and some considerations that they've never thought of before, because all they've ever heard is pros and they've never considered any cons. So what I try to do is bring up the cons. Yeah, that's what I'd say, how I do that, and it gets them thinking a little bit.
Yeah, anything to get people kind of seeing the reality of some of this stuff is always a good thing, because it's true. People often live in a world where they see the benefits, and they never really see the downfalls of this stuff. So I think I'll give you guys all your evenings back. Thank you for joining me. As always, we're going to plug, we got the website, think-liberty.com. We've got our facebook.com/thinklibertytl. We've got
we have stickers now.
We do. We have like stickers and all kinds of stuff. We'll try to get that up on the store with the I need to get the anarchy ball stuff up there too. That is also made. We've got the YouTube account, Think Liberty TV. We've got the Twitter. Is that think_liberty, Lonnie? Lonnie runs the Twitter.
Yes, it is.
Yep. And we've got the Minds account. I think that's think_liberty. We're on Steam it, and I think that's think_liberty too. Remember to follow us. If you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud or anything like that, follow us, leave us a review. That really helps. It makes us look cooler than we really are. I want to thank you guys for joining me this evening. I appreciate your time. And on behalf of Kyle, David / Rosey, and Lonnie, thank you everyone for listening. And whether or not you like it, we will probably be back again.